Well, I grew up just a few miles from here. My name's Jeff Kinney, and I wrote the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. Have any of you guys read any of these? Wow. I was so afraid I was going to come out here and there wasn't going to be anybody here at all, so thank you for coming. And these are my two sons, Will and Grant, and Will is not going to tilt that seat back and make a YouTube video out of it, right, Will? But a lot of the stories in Diary of a Wimpy Kid happened to me in real life or were inspired by things that happened to me in real life just a few miles down the road in Fort Washington, Maryland, where I grew up. So we hear Fort Washington there? Yeah? All right, there we go. So I'm going to tell a story that didn't really happen, but it's sort of about Easter, and it was inspired by something that really did happen to me. My sister used to have a nickname for me, and I hated it. Can anybody guess what that nickname was? Yeah? Bubby, no, it was close. It was Ploopy. And when my sister called me Ploopy, it drove me crazy. So she loved to call me Ploopy. So I'm going to tell a little story about that. Today, I was sitting on the couch just minding my own business, and Manny walked up to me and said, and he yells, Ploopy, right at Greg, right? I didn't know if Ploopy was some kind of little kid bad word or what, but I didn't like the sound of it. So I went to find Mom and ask her if she knew what it meant. Unfortunately, Mom was on the phone, and when she's gabbing with one of her friends, it takes forever to get her attention. And so Mom is going blah, 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 and Greg is saying, Mom, 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 Mom. Have any of you kids ever been in this situation before? Yes, a lot. Me. It's hard to get your mom off the phone when she's in that mode, right? I finally got Mom to stop talking for a second, but she was mad that I interrupted her. I told her Manny called me Ploopy, and she said, what is a Ploopy? And he said, that kind of threw me off for a second because it's the exact question I was trying to ask her. I didn't have an answer, so Mom just went back to her conversation. After that, Manny knew he had a green light to call me Ploopy whenever he wanted, and that's what he's been doing all day. I guess I should have known that telling on Manny wasn't going to get me anywhere. When me and Roderick were little, we used to tell on each other so much that it made Mom crazy. Do you guys tell on each other sometimes? You guys, right? So she brought out this thing called the tattle turtle to solve the problem. The tattle turtle. Don't tell that story. Right. So here's the tattle turtle. It's a stuffed animal that looks like a turtle. Mom came up with the tattle turtle idea when she taught preschool. The idea behind the tattle turtle was that if me and Roderick had a problem with each other, we had to tell the tattle turtle instead of Mom. Well, the tattle turtle worked out great for Roderick, but not so much for me. And Greg is saying, tattle turtle, Roderick stole all the money from my piggy bank. Right, so Greg tells the stuffed animal, but of course the stuffed animal can't do anything about it. So the next day is Easter. On the car ride to church today, I felt like I was sitting on something sticky. And when I got out and turned around to look at the back of my pants, there was chocolate all over them. Has anyone ever sat in chocolate or a jelly sandwich or something like that? I see a mom, right? Most moms have sat in something that their kid has left for them. So Greg is looking at the back of his pants here. He's got chocolate on the back of his pants. How many people saw this scene in the movie? Yeah, a good number of people. It was a little different in the movie, wasn't it? Manny had brought his Easter bunny with him in the car, and I must have been sitting on an ear or something. Mom was trying to get the family inside so we could get good seats, but I told her there was no way I was going in there looking like that. I knew Holly Hills, that's Greg's crush, and her family were probably already there, and I really didn't need her wondering if I'd pooped my pants. I can't believe I just said that in front of the White House. Mom said skipping church on Easter wasn't an option, and we argued back and forth. Then Roderick chimed in with his solution. So here's Roderick now standing here without any pants on, and he says, he can wear my pants. right? So I don't think Roderick wants to go to church that day. Roderick knows that church on Easter is always at least 2 hours long. How many people went to church yesterday? Yeah, a lot of people. I did too. It was long. So he was just looking for an excuse to get out of it. But right at that moment, Dad's boss and his family pulled up alongside us in the parking lot. And Dad's boss says, "Happy Easter, Heffleys," and he honks the horn. And there's Roderick standing there without any pants, right? Very embarrassing. Mom made Roderick put his pants back on, and then she gave me her sweater to tie around my waist. I don't know which was worse, wearing dress pants with chocolate all over them or wearing Mom's pink Easter sweater like a kilt. So here's Greg walking into church with his mom's sweater around his waist. And let's see, church was pretty full. The only seats that were empty were right up front where Uncle Joe and his family were sitting, so we sat next to them. I looked around and I spotted Holly Hills and her family 3 rows back. I was pretty sure she couldn't see what I was wearing from the waist down, so that was a relief. So Manny has it made in church. How many people here have little brothers or sisters who in church get to color and play with toys and things like that? That's what happens with Manny. So Mom and Dad let him bring all sorts of stuff with us to keep him entertained. Believe me, Mom and Dad never let me bring anything to church when I was his age. So Manny has like music, and he has toys and coloring books, action figures. Yep, this guy right there. Mom and Dad always baby Manny, though, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Last week, Manny was at preschool, and when he opened up his lunchbox, his sandwich was cut in half, not in quarters, the way he likes it. Manny threw a huge temper tantrum, and the teachers had to call Mom. So she left work and drove all the way down to Manny's school to make the extra slice. And she's saying, "There you go, sweetie." And Manny's kind of sniffing because he's been crying. Anyway, I was thinking about this at church, and all of a sudden I got an idea in my head. I leaned over to Manny and whispered, go ahead, whisper, Will. What does he whisper? Bloopy. He whispers, bloopy. Well, Manny completely lost it. He started bawling. That means crying, right? And everyone in the church turned their heads our way. Even the minister stopped talking to see what was going on. Mom couldn't calm Manny down, so we had to leave. Instead of walking out the side door, though, we walked right down the center aisle. Very embarrassing, right? I tried to look as cool as possible when we walked past the Hills family, but it was pretty tough considering the circumstances. So here's Greg walking past his crush, and he's got on this kilt, kind of a sweater that he's tied around his waist. So a very embarrassing story. How many of you guys have had something embarrassing happen to you in your life? Yeah, a lot of kids. No parents, though. That's very interesting. No parents. Okay, I'm going to read another story from the last straw. Okay, so this is about Greg, and he's decided that he's going to call Holly Hills on the phone. Okay, he's going to call her. He's very nervous. Are there any teenage boys here who have ever had to try to call a girl? Yeah, there's a guy raising his hand just a little, right? It makes you nervous. So Greg says, I've been working up the nerve to call Holly, to talk to Holly for a long time, and I decided it was now or never. When we went to church today, I tried to make sure we sat right near the Hills family, but we ended up 2 rows in front of them, which I guess was close enough. And during the part where everybody shakes hands with one another, I made my move. So Greg is leaning way over the seats, and he's shaking Holly's hands, and he's saying, "Peace be with you, Holly Elizabeth Hills." He uses her middle name, too. The handshaking thing was actually just step 1 in a 2-part plan, and the second part would come tonight. My next step was to call Holly on the phone and use the handshaking thing to get the conversation started. So now Greg is imagining he calls Holly Hills, and he says, "Hi, Holly. This is Greg Heffley. you might remember me from a very special Peace Be With You. And Holly is very impressed by this. At dinner tonight, I told everyone that I needed to make a very important call, so everyone should stay off the phone. But I guess Roderick must have figured out I was going to call a girl because he took all the handsets and hid them. That's a weird thing to do. That meant the only way to make a call was to use the speakerphone in the kitchen, but there was no chance of that happening. So Roderick is sitting there. He's hoping that Greg calls this girl on the speakerphone so Roderick can hear everything. That would be pretty embarrassing. I told Mom that Roderick took all the phones, and she made him return them to where they belonged. Eventually, Roderick went down to the basement. Later on, I snuck into Mom and Dad's room to make my call. I turned off the lights so Roderick wouldn't know I was in there, and I hid under a blanket. Then I waited for about 20 minutes to make sure he hadn't followed me. Before I had a chance to dial Holly's number, someone walked in the room and turned on the light. I thought for sure it was Roderick, but it wasn't. It was Dad. So here's Greg hiding under a blanket in his parents' room trying to make a phone call to a girl, right? I decided to stay perfectly still and let Dad get whatever he needed and leave. But Dad didn't leave. He got into bed and started reading a book. I should have just uncovered myself the second Dad walked into the room, because now I couldn't just get up and walk out or I'd give him a heart attack. So I decided to just sneak out of the room real slow. I moved about an inch a second. I figured it would take me about a half an hour to make it all the way out of the room, but there would still be enough time to call Holly after that. So Greg is very, very, very slowly crawling out of his dad's room, and his dad doesn't notice he's in there. I was only about 5 feet from the bedroom door when the phone in my hand rang and scared the living daylights out of me. So the phone rings, and Greg screams, and then his father screams too. It's a very awkward moment. I think Dad really did almost have a heart attack. And once he recovered, he didn't look happy to see me. Dad made me get out of his room, and then he slammed the door. I'm sure this episode didn't help my standing with Dad, but I guess at this point, it's probably too late anyway. And so do you guys want to see what happens when Greg actually does call Holly and finish the story? Okay. Tuesday. 2 days have already passed since I shook hands with Holly, and I didn't want any more time to go by before I spoke with her again. So, Will, do you want to read this one sentence? Luckily,
Dad and Roderick went home tonight, so I knew I could make a phone call without being bothered.
Good job. I practiced what I was going to say about 1,000,000 times, and then I finally worked the nerve up to make a call. I dialed Holly's number, and the phone started ringing. But right then... Grant's just learning to read, so we're going to have him read a few words. But right then...
Mom picked up the phone downstairs.
Downstairs. Give him a round of applause. That's good. But right then, Mom picked up the phone downstairs. Mom has this really bad habit of just dialing without checking to see if anyone else is on the phone, and that's what she did tonight. I tried to stop her, but it was no use. And here's Mom dialing the phone, and every time she hits a number, she goes, beep, 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 beep. And Greg is saying, Mom, Mom, Mom. The phone kept ringing at the Hills' house, and then someone picked up. It was Holly's mother. Mom was really confused since she didn't dial the Hills' number in the first place. I just held my breath and waited for it all to be over. And Greg's mom is saying, hello? Hello? Who's this? It took Mom and Mrs. Hills a minute to figure out who was on the other end of the line. But once they did, they just started chatting like nothing strange had happened at all. They got into this long conversation about the PTA and the fundraising committee and stuff like that. I couldn't really hang up because then Mom would hear the click and know someone was on the other end. Eventually, the conversation between Mom and Mrs. Hills turned to me. And Mom says, yep, he called his brother Ploopy Mm-hmm. At that point, I just put the phone down and went to bed. I figure that a phone call between me and Holly isn't meant to be, so I'm officially giving up. And that's the end of that story. And I think we have about 3 or 4 minutes here. Is that right, event coordinators? To answer questions if you guys have any questions. Okay, so you're going to have to yell really loud because we've got music. Go ahead, in the green shirt. Okay, yell that again, bud. Okay, he wants to know, in my 7th book, when's it going to come out? I can answer that. It's coming out in November. And what's it going to be about? It's going to be about 217 pages. No, it's going to be about Greg actually trying to find a date for the big dance. So he's trying to find a date. And guess what happens? You'll never believe what happens. Is that his ride is going to be Mr. Jefferson, but then Rowley gets the chicken pox. So Greg's going to lose his ride. My son wants to ask a question. Oh, my son asked, what color is the book going to be?
Pink, white.
And I'm not allowed to tell. Isn't that funny? I'm not allowed to tell a color. My sons don't even know. Okay, right here, buddy, with the glasses, and yell it out. That's a good question. He asked if the book is going to be pink. How many girls here would like it if the next book was pink? A good number. How many boys would never read any of my books again if I made a pink book? Right, that's what I thought. I don't think I'm going to go with pink. Sorry, everyone. Okay, any questions over here? You're going to yell it out, bud? Am I ever going to make a book that has all the books in one? I think maybe one day, once I'm done writing these books, I'll make one big fat book like a telephone book. It will be about 1,000 pages, yeah. And when I wrote these books, I actually wrote them for grown-ups, and I wanted it to be one really big fat book. So it's funny that it's a kids series and lots of individual books. Yeah? One sec. Sorry again? Is the book going to be yellow? No, it's not, because the 4th book was yellow. Go ahead, bud. And you're going to have to yell. He knows. This guy has inside information what the 7th book color is going to be. What color do you think? Light blue? That's cabin fever, but maybe. We'll see. We'll see. I'm going to get a question from a girl back there. So go ahead.
This is the 6th book.
Your brother has some of my books. Very, very cool. So I think we're going to wrap it up. And, okay, we have one more question right here. Go ahead, buddy. Am I ever going to make a book with coloring pages? Maybe one day. If kids would like that, I think I would. So let's have one more question because I see this young lady. How many books? I think I'd like to write at least 10, so I don't feel like I'm done writing. But I just wanted to thank the President and Mrs. Obama for having me here. This has been a real treat for me and my family. Isn't this beautiful, guys? We're at the White House. This is really cool. Thank you so much for having me here.